Welcome to Sewbliss. Today I'm going to show you the third video in a three-part series on how to make 3 different stuffed animals. Today I'm going to show you how to make a hedgehog. Now, just like in the previous videos, the supplies that you're going to need for this project are first you're going to need some fabric. And I just used a cotton fabric on one side and a flannel on the other. And I used very little of it, so I just got a 1/4 yard cut. And I still have a ton left over. Next, you're going to need a pattern. And just like the last videos, I hand drew mine. And if you liked mine, I'll leave a link to it below where you can use it. Next, you're going to need some stuffing, and I just got that at a fabric store. And then you're going to need all of your basic sewing supplies, including your iron. Now, let's get started. Now, your first step in making the hedgehog is going to be preparing the pattern. Once you have the pattern ready, you're then ready to cut it out. When you're cutting it out, you're going to want to make sure you have a left side and a right side. So here I just put my fabrics right sides together because that's how we're going to sew them. And I just have my pattern pinned on top, and I also have my feet over here. This is only 2 layers, so I'm going to need 2 more of the feet. So now I'm going to cut these out. Now with my pieces all cut out, I'm then ready to sew, and I'm going to sew the feet first. So I'm going to take each piece and putting the fabric right sides together. So mine are right now. Just like that, right sides together. I'm going to sew from this point around to this point. I'm going to leave this part open so we can turn it right sides out, and that will get sewn in later on. Now once you have your feet sewn, it'll look something like this. So we're just going to trim it up before we start the next step. So I'm just going to trim about half of the seam allowance that we had. And now after I've trimmed that, I'm actually going to trim the corners even more and cut little triangles out of them. So that way it'll curve nicely once we turn it right sides out. So I'm going to cut to my stitching, but not through my stitching. So they are going to be really little triangles. So here you can see mine trimmed, and now I'm just going to turn it right sides out. And now my feet are all ready to go. So now I'm going to work on the hedgehog part. Now if you want, you can add a little stuffing to the feet to make them a little bit thicker, but I think I'm just going to leave them as is and just have them hanging off the ends. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to sew the body of the hedgehog, but before I do that, I want to make sure the feet are placed and that they get stitched into that same seam. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the hedgehog. I have my pieces right sides together ready to sew, and I'm just going to place the feet where I want them. So there's one, and I'm placing all my raw edges together, and there's the other. Maybe move that down a little bit, move that one in. Okay, so I'll close that up, and now I can just pin all the way around the hedgehog and have it ready to sew. And then I will be able to go over to my sewing machine, and I'm going to sew all the way around it, but I am going to leave a 2 to 3 inch wide opening so that way we can turn it right sides out and add the stuffing. Now after sewing around my hedgehog and leaving this opening right here, this is what it looks like. So now before I turn it right sides out, we're going to trim it up again, and you're going to want to trim up these points. So we're going to take out some fabric so that way once you turn it right sides out, there'll be enough room for that point to look good. So I'm just going to take off about half of what the seam allowance is and just trim that, and then even the point I'm going to just kind of cut off that tip, and I'm not cutting my stitching at all. Make sure you don't do that. You're going to need to go back and re-stitch that. So I'm just going to do that all the way around the hedgehog just so he turns nicely and looks good. Now another thing you're going to want to make sure to do before you turn it right sides out is you're going to want to clip to, not through, the stitching on these points on the inside. So that way when it turns right sides out, it'll turn nicely and won't pucker or tuck a little bit. So just make sure you clip to that point, and then you should be ready to turn it right sides out. Here I have my hedgehog turned right sides out. When you are turning it right sides out, you might want to use a point turner. This is a seam gauge with a point turner on the end of it, but you can buy point turners individually as well. And that will just really help when you're trying to get these points out. It'll make them look a lot nicer and just really get that nice crisp point out for you. Now with it right sides out, I'm going to press the hedgehog just to give it a nice crisp look and to make sure the edges are all ready to go and the points are all ready. And I'm also going to be folding under these raw edges that are left open so that we can hand sew them. So I'm going to fold those under 1/4 of an inch and iron that down, so that'll give us a nice edge to work with when we hand sew. After my hedgehog is all ironed, I'm then ready to start stuffing it. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a little piece of stuffing at a time and really work it into those corners, so that way each corner has a good amount of stuffing. And you can just do however much you want, if you want a little thicker or a little thinner. And I'm just going to work it in there, because the corners are going to be the toughest spot, so you might need really little pieces to get to it. Now after you're done stuffing the hedgehog, next we're going to take a needle and thread, and I'm just going to close up that opening that we used to stuff. So I'm just going to start at one end. I can take one needle out, and I'm going to start on one side. I'm going to take a stitch. You want to make sure it's on the inside, so that way the knot you made at the end of the needle and thread is on the inside. So I'll just take that stitch and pull tight, and now I'm going to go over to the other side, the other fabric, and take a stitch from that. And I am taking stitches from that line that we created when we ironed it. So it'd be a 1/4 inch line that we created. And I am using double thread just to give it a little bit more strength. And now I'm just going to go back and forth. So now I'm going to go back to the brown side and take a stitch. And now I can go back to the pattern side and take a stitch. Now once I was done stitching this closed, I just tied a knot at the end and then put the threads through to the middle. And now I'm going to create the eye for the hedgehog. Now you can make yours into a circle, a line, an X. You can even put a button on. I think I'm just going to do a circle, just something to give it a distinction that it's an eye. So I'll probably do mine about right here and just take a few stitches all in the same spot in the size and shape that I want it. Now after the eye is complete, you are all done with your hedgehog. Thanks for watching this video, guys. Make sure to watch the first and second video in this series, and make sure to subscribe to Sewbliss, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!